Welcome to Building the Premier Accounting Firm, having a successful accounting, bookkeeping, and tax business. I'm Roger Knecht, president of Universal Accounting Center, and I'm excited to be with you here today. I've been working with accounting professionals now for more than 20 years, helping individuals both start and build their successful accounting, bookkeeping, and tax businesses so that they can literally have the lifestyle they've always craved for. This is a chance for them to, in essence, create something that they didn't even think was possible, being in business for themselves, but not by themselves, with Universal Accounting Center. Universal Accounting Center is a post-secondary school helping accounting professionals, CPAs, tax professionals literally get the training, certification, support, coaching, and mentoring that they need to literally offer quality accounting services and getting paid what they're worth. Basically, what we do is we help accounting professionals confidently and competently offer those quality accounting services so that they can be distinguished in their area as the premier accounting firm. We invite you to listen to our episodes. The various episodes that we have are committed to helping you with tips and tricks on what you can be doing in your business to be that premier accounting firm. And subscribe to our podcast to get notified as to when the next publications or episodes appear. Today, we actually have a very special guest. It's Mitchel Levy. Mitchel is someone that I've spoken to on numerous occasions. We have phenomenal conversations, and you get to listen in today. He happens to be a global credibility expert. It's pronounced Levy, so I presume this is something that people struggle with. So I knew that, and I'm glad to emphasize that. He happens to be a TED speaker. I've known a number of my years, and TED Talks are intimidating. So, Mitchel, to know that you've done those is, I think, quite impressive. He's also an international best-selling author of over 60 books. I know a lot of us read a lot, but it's another thing to write a lot, and 60 books is quite amazing. He's the AHA guy, and that's how I first met Mitchel. Is he has what's called AHA That. It's ahathat.com. He helps extract genius from the head of individuals in a 2-hour interview so that his team can actually ghostwrite your book, publish it and distribute it, and make an Amazon best-selling author out of you in 4 months. He is an accomplished entrepreneur who has created 20 businesses in Silicon Valley, including 4 publishing companies that have published over 850 books. He's provided strategic consulting to over 100 companies and has been a chairman of the board for a NASDAQ-listed company. Mitchel's happily married and has been married for 30 years and regularly spends his time with family and friends. He, in fact, spends 4 weeks in Europe each year. So, Mitchel, welcome, and thank you for being on the show today.
My pleasure, Roger. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is going to be fun because one of the things that struck me as quite odd, and I don't mean odd in a peculiar way, I mean odd as in I was taken back by it, is when I first met you, one of the things that you emphasized was the importance of showing up. And it was quite an interesting discussion as we were discussing how some people just fail to arrive. Do you remember that conversation?
I absolutely do. And it's one of those outcomes that came from, and I'm excited that I actually did get a chance to interview you as well, Roger, for this. I'm in the midst of doing a Napoleon Hill exercise. And this particular one, I'm interviewing 500 thought leaders on credibility. And it was about 40 interviews in that. And these are beautiful. These are 6 to 8 minute interviews where when you listen to them, or watch them, you really get to see the inside of somebody. And it was about 40 episodes in, and I was on a podcast, and the host looked at me, and we were preparing ahead of time for the show. And he says, "Mitchel, give me a summary. What have you learned so far?" And so I went into this introspective mode, and I started thinking about it, and I ended up with a simple phrase. And now that we've done over 180 interviews, this phrase applies more than ever, and that is to show up when you show up. And then, Roger, what was fascinating about that, I now have, I've been keeping statistics, and I didn't realize when I was doing the interviews that that's one of the things I need to do. And it's like, who comes on time, and who speaks with their heart, and who's prepared. And what's fascinating is so let me add to, when you show up, you need to show up. And that means coming early, being prepared, and coming with your heart. And what kind of shocks me, so imagine, your typical accounting firm, you have clients coming in and you have a meeting at 8 o'clock. As the accountant, you're going to be there at 5 minutes to 8. You're going to be in your room, in your office, waiting for them. Imagine coming 3 minutes late. Like that's not, think about the loss of trust that would happen if you show late to your meeting. This was obvious. I have to tell you what's fascinating. Let me just give you stats and then I'll let you ask me that next question.
Okay.
Is I started keeping statistics of who, once again, I didn't know I was going to do this. I feel like a school teacher. Who comes early. And it turns out that 8% of the people who are scheduled for the interviews, we end up doing a live interview on Facebook. 8% come early. Early is 10 minutes or before. And when I look at the financials, those are the richest people who actually have come on my show so far. It turns out that 60% come on time, and that's between 9 minutes and 4 minutes. And what's shocking, 25% of people come late. Now, late is between 3 minutes and 0. Now, you know this as a show host, particularly if you're a show host going live. If your guest is coming in 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, or like on the thing, you're like, oh my God. I mean, you don't feel really comfortable. Now, here's the worst part. 7% of the people come after the half hour. So let's just frame this for you. This is very obvious as soon as I say it. And that's why I gave the example of when a client comes into the office. You're on the Global Credibility Experts show talking about your credibility for a live show, and you think it's credible to come after the half hour.
Well, one of the things that I think is astounding there is, as much as I thought I was good at being on time, I think what you're emphasizing here and what I've actually learned or taken from it, I haven't learned it because I'm still struggling to apply it, is really the power of being early. And I think that actually is proven when I've been early to be helpful, because the stress or the anxiety of the upcoming meeting is lessened because I have time to kind of decompress before going in. I have a moment to reflect on my thoughts, gather my thoughts, get a little bit ready, rather than rushing from one thing to the next. And so this whole showing up principle, ever since we first spoke, really resonated with me, because it also turned into not just showing up, but being present is how I also chose to take it.
Oh, that's an important one. Well, let me give you, when you were talking, I had one thought on, I'm going to talk to you about being present. That's an easy one. Well, easy is a relative term, but I was just thinking about a network event. One of the best techniques you could use as a networking event is come early. And if it happens that you're the first one there and the host needs a little bit of help, you offering to move chairs or turn on the projector or whatever you need to do, you're going to put yourself in good standing with the host. And at some point in time, the host will say, oh, hey, what are you here for? And your response should be, I'm looking for people. So for those that you find interesting, have this, and you know this term, customer point of pain. I'm looking for people who want to solve this problem, right? And then you've planted a seed. Mm-hmm. So that's really showing up on time is coming early. Let's talk about presence. If you have a prospect coming into your office or you have a prospect phone call, don't you actually look at their website? I mean, as an accountant, don't you try to, if they're a public company, don't you look at some of their financials ahead of time just to be aware? And if you don't, shame on you. Because in today's world, if you have a meeting, if I do 20 to 25 meetings a day, and they're all Zoom meetings, and I will spend a little bit of time researching, Googling, looking at the website, looking at their LinkedIn profile of everyone I'm talking to ahead of time. So I have at least a guess as to where the conversation might go. If it's open-ended, how do I steer it? And I have to tell you, Roger, what happens sometimes is I have a vendor who gets me on, and I like talking to people selling me stuff. I'm either going to learn something or maybe there would be a partner. But occasionally what happens is somebody gets me on the call and they go, so Mitchell, what do you do? and I certainly don't mind anyone who really needs time. At some point in time, you want a half hour on my calendar, you got a half hour. Mm-hmm. Getting that second half hour, we have to find a good reason for that. But if you're going to use that half hour asking me to tell you something that you could have spent 5 minutes researching ahead of time, you're gonna get sort of a, how to say this, I'm gonna teach you a lesson that hopefully you'll take with you for the rest of your life, and that is to prepare ahead of time.
Well said. Well said. One of the things that's quite difficult is if you're not doing that research, that due diligence, I think you too often start to look ignorant just because you're not going in with the obvious information that they've put out there publicly.
Yes, yes, and by the way, if you're thinking about garnering the trust of somebody, if if something happened, particularly if it's a public firm and the stuff is out there, and in the initial part of the conversation, you could bring it up and comment on it, and hopefully not in a way that's controversial, but comment on a way that's soothing. All of a sudden, the person on the other side of the table is thinking, "Oh, I like this person."
So one of the things that I think really resonates with me about all of this that we're discussing is for accounting professionals, oftentimes what we see is it's the numbers and it's the information. And we fail to remember too often how personable this business truly is because of the interactions we're having with the business owners. It's not just the information that they're needing from us, but they're needing the information, the attentiveness, they're needing our personalities to come through so that they can digest the information we're providing in the financial reports in a way that they can then use to make intelligent business decisions. And so they are filtered through us as to how we're choosing to deliver them. And so showing up on time, being prepared, these things are all very, very necessary to offer quality accounting services. So that brings me to the next thing, which is speaking from the heart. I love this idea of being genuine. What do you think that means? How do you feel that applies?
So I want to give you two different answers for that. So first, let me just tell you a little bit about the TED Talk, and then second, I'll give you the statistics from the interviews I'm doing. So the TED Talk I did at the end of 2017, I think it was released in 2018, it was a very simple concept. We do business with those that we know, like, and trust. And so the know and like, obviously you've got to do some marketing, you got to be known, or maybe it's word of mouth marketing or whatever the networking is. People need to know you, but if they want to do business with you in today's world, there's so many competitors. They got to kind of like you, and obviously they need to trust you. I would say when I hear the concept of accountants and CPAs, I almost immediately, because of the schooling that needs to go through, because of the continuing education units, I almost immediately have that trust thing pop up. It's kind of like you would never expect to have a shady accountant, right? Well, of course, that's not 100% true, but it's you could hear that, and people could easily do reference checks on you, and that's important. And so the trust thing is, and I defined it in the TED Talk with three different elements, and that is having integrity, having authenticity, and having vulnerability.
Good.
And so what's interesting about that is if you're this really I don't know, it's like this accountant, or think of it as an engineer that's just so monotone on how they deliver content, and they never say anything personal, and they never admit when they're wrong. Right? That's certainly a problem I see with engineers and accountants. If you never admit you're wrong, then you don't seem to have integrity. You don't seem to have that authenticity, and I subsequently may have a hard time trusting you. If I don't know, if I'm having a long-term relationship with you and you're really, as the type of accountant that's inside my business, I need to know about your family. I want to know a little bit more about you as a human to see who you are and how I could relate, because it will affect what you do in terms of your work with us. And then, of course, if I'm having meetings with you, I don't want to dread it. I want to enjoy it.
Yes.
So let me talk about the credibility series. So we have interesting statistics. Once again, I didn't know I was going to keep track of that, but I started keeping track of, do people speak from their heart? Do they speak sort of they're good but not great, or are they robotic? And it's kind of interesting. So I'll define all the three, but let me give you the stats. At the moment, 62% of people speak from their heart. This is 188 interviews. Only 62% spoke from their heart. So the question becomes, how can you get to know somebody if they don't actually show you who they are? Okay. Uh, 31% spoke good, and I'll define what that is. And then 7% spoke robotically.
Huh.
Robotically is somebody who talks in a single monotone at a very slow pace, right? So what's interesting is if your client also consumes data robotically, that's a good fit. But otherwise, you're kind of in trouble. And then so let's talk about good versus speaking with heart. When one way to define this is when I look at humans, what happens, and if you're familiar with NLP, neuro linguistic programming, you
Yeah.
have to decide how people process data. Some people process data visually. Some people process data orally, and some people feel it. They process it kinesthetically. And so, what typically, when I say good, it's somebody who only speaks in one of the three areas. Like they only speak visually, or they only speak or oratorily, or they only speak kinesthetically. And so the problem, for instance, I'm a visual thinker. And so the problem sometimes with oral personalities is you got to hear a story. They won't actually give you direct answers. They're going to tell you the answers through a story. And if you only speak, if you assume that the world is broken into thirds, visual, kinesthetic, and oral, and you only speak in one of the three areas, guess what you're doing? You are, without doing it on purpose, you are alienating 2/3 of your potential client base. And so speaking with heart gives you the opportunity for people to see you regardless of how they process information. Does that make sense?
It does. And, as you're describing it, I think it makes a lot of sense because as accounting professionals, we're going to have clients that either like the information and they like it in a printed format, or they like the visualization of you trying to illustrate how this applies to them. I can see each of these applications going from one client to another client and each having unique needs, and we need to adapt how we're delivering that information to them for them to then be able to use it. So what you're sharing here makes sense, because when you were talking earlier about being a trusted advisor, being authentic and so forth, that's I think where we need to kind of excel as accounting professionals. We need to kind of step up our game and build better relationships with our customers, because I've always said this, the business owner is probably sharing with you things that no one else knows. You as the accounting professional know more about their business, the financial situation, the cash flow situation, the tax situation than anyone, the spouse, the business partner, the employees. And so they have to feel comfortable with you. And the things that you're sharing allow them to become more relaxed and comfortable with that relationship. They're not dreading it, as you mentioned earlier.
You brought up. So I've been very visual, sort of in my communication style so far, which is normal for me. Let me tell you a story so I could jump into both the oral and the kinesthetic piece of it. So one of the things that happens is I have a unique question one. It's the world often thinks about the value proposition. When somebody says, "What do you do?" They say, "I do this," or "We do that." I have a different question. The question I ask is, what is your CPOP? What is your customer point of pain? And I'm looking for a 3-second response, or maybe a 5-second response. And so 98% of people, even though I send a 4-minute video on how to prepare for the interview,
I remember the
98%
video,
of
by the way.
people,
You're good.
well, it's structured, right?
Yes.
One of my superpowers is building systems. So the interesting part is 98% of people still can't answer that first question. And so what happens is I'll often say, "Hey, do you mind if I give you a little bit of coaching?" And almost everyone, there's one person who said, "No, I'll come to that afterwards." Um, Almost everyone says, "Oh my God, I'd be delighted." Right? And now what happens? What they've done is they've seen that I've done more of these, that I've done many of these. They've seen that I've sent a video. They recognize, and I tell them somewhere in the process that we're not doing the interview for me. I'm actually doing the interview for them. So if you're an accountant, you're not doing the accounting for you. You're not doing the accounting for the IRS. You're doing the accounting in the appropriate way that the client benefits. you need to communicate that. They need to recognize that you have their best interest at heart, not your best interest. So when I say, do you mind if I coach you? Because I want this to be the best episode for you, my guest, as humanly possible. And they say, typically they say yes. And then we walk through the coaching process. And what's really interesting with everybody, we always come up with a 3 to 5 second CPOP. But when you watch the episodes, when we go live and I ask the question, they sometimes revert back to what they walked in the door with. So it was really fascinating. There was this one person who I asked, first thing I said is, did you watch the 4-minute video? He said, no. So I not prepared. He goes, but I've done so many of these things. I'm really good at this. I'm like, okay, that's great. And I said, well, let me tell you about the questions. And the first question is, and I said, what is your CPOP? What is your customer point of pain? And his response was the typical value proposition. I do this, and this is what happens, and this is what the benefits are for the clients. And, yes. And it took him, it was about 30 seconds. I said, all right. I said, what if could we summarize that in like a 3-second response? And then he said the same thing, but he did it in 12 seconds. And I said, would you mind if I do a little bit of coaching? Now, here was his response. Absolutely not. I've been doing this forever. I'm good at what I do. You have your methodology and I have mine, and I'm going to say it the way I want to say it. And, okay. And so what was very interesting at that stage, normally as a human, my first response was to respond back. But I learned the benefit sometimes of having just dead air. And so instead of responding, I just was quiet for a couple more seconds, and he felt comfortable. And he immediately said, I just don't think this is going to work for us. And I said, I couldn't agree with you more. I wish you the best of luck in everything you do. And then we hung up. And what's interesting to me is, how could somebody hire someone who is so full of themselves and so sure of themselves that they're not willing to even listen or partake in a different way of looking at the world or viewing things? And I have to tell you, as part of the industrial age, that is what we were trained. We were trained as part of the industrial age that there's one answer and only one answer, and this is the way to do it. And so it was a command and control from tops down approach to how we did business. And if you're in business today, picking up new clients, that world doesn't work. The world that works today is one in which it's a more holistic human. There's no difference between the person who's working at work and the person who's home with family or friends. And that human is someone that you get to see, you get to smell, you get to touch, you get to understand who they are. And those people who are part of my life, those people who I interact with that I will call partners in what I do, we know about each other. Maybe not all the darkest, deepest secrets with everyone. That's not true. But I agree with my accountant. They know a lot of stuff. And the person who's my accountant is, I always feel when we talk, he puts my best interest at heart. And at a point in time where he's feeling uncomfortable, he'll let me know why and where it stands. And I feel really good about interacting with him. And I think that's the thing to be thinking about. If you're an old school person, the way the world used to be, you better wake up and start changing. Otherwise, you will wake up one day and you won't have a business anymore.
So to recap, what you're saying is your accountant, those people that matter most, the ones that you connect with, are those that are showing up, that are present, they're prepared, and that they're actually being genuine. They're speaking from the heart. You're feeling as if you're getting to know them at their core. And doing so, you feel that then brings out what you refer to as your CPOP. You're able to better connect with the person and really get to know what their needs are. You can articulate well what you specialize in and what you're able to offer. Is that a good summary of what we're looking at here?
Roger, that was beautiful. Well said. Thank you.
You're very welcome. So I want to get to a little bit more of the core of what's going on here. You spoke at the very beginning of this Napoleon Hill project and how you've now interviewed more than 100 individuals and you're just beginning in this process. what led you to even want to start and undertake this wonderful task that you're doing here? I think this is phenomenal.
Well, thank you. You know, it's it's always interesting who we are in life and how we show up. And it I learned fairly early in my career that what I was very good at doing, although I will say this is my vulnerability, I only speak the English language. That said, within the English language, I speak accounting, I speak finance, I speak sales, I speak marketing, I speak CEO. I sit on the board of a public company. I speak public company. I speak executive board level. And so what's interesting is my entire career, I've always been this interpreter, allowing one like particularly engineering and marketing to be able to talk to each other. Like the language comes out different, right? So you just need to make sure you connect the dots. And during the dot-com days, or we'll go back. So the last time I worked for a company was 1997.
Okay.
I left Sun Microsystems. I was running the e-commerce component of Sun's supply chain. And since then, I've been on my own. I've started 20 companies. Actually, it's more than that, but I just don't add anymore. And it's been a fun journey. And what's interesting is the areas that I've picked up. So, and I'll just give you three. The first is during the dot-com days, Esther Dyson called me Mr. E-commerce. So
Okay.
I was that guy who was going around and I was helping CEOs, VP operations recognize that this new technology is coming out. And this technology will allow us to talk directly to customers, to allow us to completely revitalize our supply chain. And it was really shocking during those days that there were people, CEOs, VP of operations say, no, the internet's just a fad. And we know that's not true. When the dot bomb came, that forced me to change who I was and what I was focused on. Because for a short period of time in human history, it was around 2000, 2001. There was about a 12, 18 month period where people didn't care about the word e-commerce anymore.
Yeah.
So I needed to find something else to do. I had a bunch of different projects I was working on at a CEO networking group, a couple other things. And in 2005, I started what was that next trend that I was going to be part of. And that was, I saw the democratization of book publishing happening. And so I became a book publisher. And what happened, Roger, is I published between 2005 and 2017. I published over 800 books. But what I could say is I woke up and realized I was serving the wrong audience.
Okay.
And what that meant was that I always wanted to serve the audience, which was me. And for me, what I wanted to do is be able to write books quicker. And we could come back to how I made that transition in learning, but I want to get to your question because this is a long answer to your question, right? So in 2018, I started focusing on the Done For You service. And this is what I'll give you what we do today, and then I'll tell you where the global credibility expert came from.
Yes.
So what we do today is my CPOP, busy, successful professionals looking for more credibility through a book, but have no time. And so 3 seconds, easy to understand. You got your arms around it. I'll tell you the answer. Imagine that through a 3-hour interview, we have ghostwritten, published, distributed, made the person an Amazon best-selling author. We've done that in 4 months and they've spent 10 hours or less. So I've fine-tuned the messaging to go, oh, I get it. When I started doing that and started implementing the Done For You service, it was somewhere around 6 to 7 months. I'm like, I need to change my branding. I need to focus on something that's more relevant. And here's one thing I'll actually tell you. The concept of just having a book is great. It is by far the best credibility piece possible. That said, if you write a book or have us write a book and we give it to you and you do nothing with it, it's like getting a PhD and not putting it on your LinkedIn profile. It's not going to do anything for you, right? So I have always thought about, well, how do I pull together partners that can deliver more than, so I do the book, I'm being very focused. And what partners can I pull in that will deliver more value on top of the book? And I wanted those clients that I interacted with just to immediately trust me that I knew other credibility pieces that would help get their book to market or help get them the market in a way that was unique. And I went to by the way, this is one of those things. I went to a guy, he does a brand in 2 days session.
Okay.
And as a result of doing that, I put on the new title, Global Credibility Expert. And I've been doing thought leadership since the .com days. And so I thought this was pretty obvious. It felt really good. And I was doing that for about 6 to 8 months. And I go, I say it, but what's the credibility behind that besides saying I've been doing thought leadership for 25 years, right? And so what it was so funny. I just kind of woke up one morning and I go, Napoleon Hill wrote Think and Grow Rich after interviewing 500 people. There is no real good, compelling book on credibility. As a matter of fact, I'll even tell you the definition isn't entirely right. And so I want to redefine what the word credibility means. And I want to do it after doing some really good qualitative research. So I decided to interview 500 people on credibility. And while I'm doing the interviews, and this is what's different than the Napoleon Hill days, everyone I'm interviewing also gets an asset. And it was really, Roger, you're going to love this as soon as I tell you. Had
Okay.
Whitney Johnson on last week, and Whitney has 1.7 million followers on LinkedIn. So she's like, I've known her for 5 or 6 years, but we never talked before. We kind of came to that conclusion. And at the end of the interview, I asked her if she would do a testimonial, and I often ask people to do that. And she said something that kind of blew me away. I'm still reeling from it. She goes, Mitchell, I was so excited to shoot my credibility sizzle reel with you. And Roger, it really blew me away. And I started, because we think about a speaker sizzle reel going back and forth between a number of different scenarios. But as I'm really thinking about this, and I'm really thinking about Whitney talking from the heart, what I've given to Whitney and now all these other people is I've given the ability for someone who doesn't know them to look inside their heart, assuming they speak from their heart. And remember, the number I said before is only 62%. So 62% of the 188 people are speaking from their heart. And it gives the prospects, imagine going into a meeting and knowing exactly who you're interacting with, because you kind of see who they are and see what they stand for and decide that you like them even before you meet them. That's what I'm doing. And so I didn't really realize, Roger, that I wanted to make sure that I could wear the title Global Credibility Expert. And trust me, no one else has done these sort of things before. And what I realized about 40 or 50 interviews in, that I know what I'm doing for the rest of my life. I need to help define what this is for the world and help more companies, more individuals communicate and do business with their heart, to do it in such a way that has that trust component, to do it in such a way where, it's sort of the old days where you'd shake somebody's hand and they'd say what they're due. And guess what? They actually do what they said. That's the world that I want to live in. That's the world that I'm going to help shepherd in.
Well, one, I love what you shared because having experienced it myself, I can relate. But you wear your hat well, and I mean that both figuratively and literally. Because when you talk about meeting with these global leaders, these influencers, and interviewing them, that rapid fire discussion that you have, I would assume that the people who are at their core, their essence, they are who they are, they more comfortably respond to and interact with you, because as you're asking the questions, it's very comfortable for them to respond because they don't have to think about what they're going to say next, because they naturally know who they are and what they are, and they're just going to let that essence come through in the conversation. And that's where I think you get to that genuine state that you've been referring to. So I love what you're doing. So I need to ask, you brought up Whitney, you've done these 180 plus interviews. What stands out through all those experiences? What interview really resonated with you, and why?
That's a beautiful question. First time asked that question. I think what's beauteous for me, and I don't know if I I don't want to, obviously, because I mentioned Whitney, she was pretty cool. I interviewed Ben Gay III, who is the last living protege of Napoleon Hill.
And I know
So
who
that
Ben
was
Gay.
interesting.
Yes, yes, the
And
closer.
and you and I talked, right? I mean, that was interesting. It's
You're going to
just
throw me in the mix?
I I love yes. So
Thank you.
well, because you were a pleasant surprise because I had false expectations about what somebody running an accounting university would be like, and you far exceeded all my expectations.
Thank you.
And and I think a better way to answer that is was was the person I'm interacting with, did they come prepared, right? And did they actually show me their heart? And for those people who either they just naturally knew to do that well, that the prep videos and everything else made that happen, or as this part of the experience, like sometimes the transformation that I see some of these humans have between when I first start talking to them and 10 minutes later, that transformation sometimes is so significant because first I make them feel comfortable. I
Wow.
make it fun. And that's, by the way, if anything you do in life, if it's not comfortable, you're not having fun, either fix it or do something else. Just,
Okay.
we'll just say it's simple, right?
Yes.
And, and then that transformation that when all of a sudden they open up, and then, by the way, 6 to 8 minutes goes by so fast. And so afterwards, and they look at me and they said, "How do I do?" I go, "What do you think? Did you share you?" And, and, and most of the time they actually know it. And I go, "Man, that was amazing," because and what makes it worthwhile. And I know I've said this, but when I respond and I say this was amazing, what I'll say, it was amazing because if I was your prospect, I would feel comfortable having that first conversation with you. And that's kind of the lens that I'm putting on. I'll tell you, we had somebody else this week, which was really interesting, and I'll give you some stats.
Okay.
This was very fascinating for me. He has somebody in his office calling and making 1,500 phone calls a week. That's 300 a day. He's making 1,500 phone calls a week too. And for accountants, for most professional service providers, how do you actually close? Well, you close through a strategy call. At some point in time, you have to either get on the phone or get on Zoom and
Hmm.
be able to have a face to face with a person, and that's when you're going to close,
Yes.
right? So he does 1,500 calls to get 4 strategy calls a week. Which, by the way, I thought that number was low, but let's just say that's a good number for him. And now here's the shocking part: 2 of the 4 people don't show up. Now, of the 2 that show up, he's got like an 82% close rate.
Wow.
So here's what's interesting. So I got that feedback from Whitney, credibility sizzle reel, and I got that sort of that scenario from him. And so the question becomes, now that that's available, imagine when the person sets up the strategy call, if they send their credibility sizzle reel, will that allow some percentage of the people who wouldn't show up in the past to show up now? And secondly, would that help increase the efficacy of the actual strategy call? I mean, 82% is pretty high, but if they don't need to spend the 5 to 6 minutes to explain who they are because the credibility sizzle reel does that help them have a better conversation?
Yes.
And so to answer your question, I love the interviews where people actually show up and they show themselves. Those are always my favorite. And then if I could also, if they teach me something new, I know that's a little self-serving, but if I learned something new or an application of how they're using it in their business or how they can improve what they do, Roger, that's always fun for me.
Well, one of the things that you're doing here is you're helping me reflect on my own experience being interviewed by you, but also other conversations I've had, whether I've been conducting the interview or being interviewed. And the thing that really occurs in every one of those situations is where the moment of rapport occurs with the interviewer or interviewee, the two connecting. And that moment is almost like a flower that is blooming. It just opens up. The person relaxes. You can you can physically feel that the conversation is shifted because all of a sudden the person is very comfortable. And for you to accomplish that with someone in a rapid fire setting in 6 to 8 minutes, where they're all of a sudden getting to their essence, I think is just amazing. It's a testament to your skill as an interviewer to literally let the person become that comfortable with you. But at the same time, as a person being interviewed quite often, it's nice to find that comfortable space that you're able to just kind of open up and speak freely.
I appreciate that. It was, I don't know if I mentioned to you, but I certainly haven't mentioned to your audience yet. I have two superpowers. One is being able to pull the genius out of somebody's head. It's what we do as part of the ghostwriting for our books. It's what I'm doing with these interviews. So, and the second is to build systems. So I was so excited when I built the system and actually, here's the cool part. I didn't build it directly. I let my team build it so that they can be empowered and feel like they own it. And they own it. And I'm so excited about that. And so the interesting part about the system, so I did my first interview, this guy by the name of Tad Stevens. And I was so excited so here's what happens. We do the interview. It turns out that my marketing person then sends a link, because we're doing Facebook Live, sends a link that evening directly to the Facebook Live. In about a week or two, we actually come up with 10 aha messages from the interview. And it's really just the short snippets that came out of this interview. And then at the moment, I think when it might have been we released in a month, now we're releasing about 3 months down the road. When we actually officially release the video, we then release it on Vimeo. We release it on the Thought Leader Life website. And then after that, I think it's about a month or two after that, we put it into a podcast. So we combine 3 episodes together and we have a podcast, and then that goes on all the podcast stations, right? So we're basically taking this content and repurposing it a lot. So has Tad Stevens, I was so excited. I did the interview. Now, what happened with Tad, he was my first one. So as soon as he came on the air, I turned on Facebook Live and we went. And I was so excited because I didn't do anything. My team did the 10 aha messages. We sent it to him. I get him on. I got him on Zoom. I said, Tad, what do you think? What do you think of the 10 aha messages? I was so proud, right? And he goes, Mitchell, I think your team did a great job. I think I did a horrible job on the interview. And I'm like, oh, right. So by the way, it was very nice of him to be vulnerable and say things that way. He could have said it in a different way, but I immediately jumped into my engineering hat. Engineers like to fix stuff, right? So I'm like, oh, what could we have done to fix it? Right. And he said, well, what if we talked a little bit ahead of time and you made me feel more comfortable and we rehearsed some of the questions? Like, oh, that's pretty cool. I could do that. And then I go, what if I created a video just sort of with expectations of what I'm looking for? He goes, that would be great. And so the first couple weren't as great as they're getting better over time. And I think what happens, Roger, is when people now go to thoughtleaderlife.com and they start watching episodes, what happens many times is they start binging, because it's really addicting to have somebody talk about who they are in 6 to 8 minutes if you could really see them. And so people come to me and at first, when the first words out of their mouth is, oh my God, I couldn't stop. I watched about 6 or 8 of these things. I love what you're doing. I'm like, man, we're going to have a great interview.
Well, I think what you're describing there is that what you're doing resonates with people. People are drawn to it, and because they're in such short bites, they're drawn to see the next one and the next one. So that's a testament to how well they're going. But I loved how you shared the engineering, the system side of you, to say that you listened to those first interviewees, you heard what Tad had to say, and you improved your process. And I think that's so true for all of us in all of our lives, accounting professionals, especially when onboarding clientele and so forth. It's how can we take what we're doing and make it better? How can we make it easier for our customers? How can we make it easier for those that are involved in the process to follow a system, that it's turnkey, that it's systematized? I love what you're describing there. So I've got one final question for you, Mitchell. You mentioned that you think you found your purpose, that these interviews have given you a sense of being. So, thinking of your parents, what kind of legacy are you leaving that you're proud of? What would your mother and father be pleased to see that you've done with the family name and that you've been able to accomplish through this whole experience that you now see yourself doing for the coming years?
You know, it's a, I'm not sure I could have answered this question as well a year or before then. And by the way, one of the things we did, I did a whole series of interviews of what legacy is. And and so first, let me define legacy from that perspective, and then I'll tell you what I'm doing.
Okay.
So legacy from, and I interviewed some really amazing people, Marshall Goldsmith, the number one CEO coach of the world, Jeffrey Hazlett, who used to run Kodak's marketing, now runs a C-suite organization, and a bunch of others. And what was surprising to me was the universal concept that legacy is not just what you leave for tomorrow, but how you're living life today and how you're giving back today.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, that was that heartfelt conversation of how are you living life today that you'll be remembered in the hearts and minds of others. And so for me, I just look at Napoleon Hill and I look at all the entrepreneurs and all the institutes and associations and things that are happening as a result of him interviewing 500 millionaires and writing Think and Grow Rich. And I know without a doubt for hundreds of years, people are going to be talking about what credibility means or what Mitchell Levy was able to do to help people really interact from their heart, to be able to, the best thing, Roger, I could say is if you and I decided to do something and it's off book, it's not something I normally do. If it's something I normally do, I'll send you a flyer or I'll send you a video of what we do. If it's off script, you and I are going to look at each other. We're going to look, and if we're in the same room, we're going to shake hands. If we're on Zoom, we're going to virtually shake hands. And you know with 100% certainty that I'm going to deliver you exactly what I say. And if I miss, I'm going to let you know ahead of time, and I'm going to keep working hard till I make that KPI. That's the world that I want to see coming back. The world that we lived in when we lived in a village. And when we lived in a village, what was fascinating is if a vendor in the village didn't deliver what they said they would, the village would help self-correct or they'd ostracize. When we now move into the global village, which is where that next evolution of what's going to happen in the world, when we move into that global village, if you're not delivering value, if you're not speaking from your heart, if you don't deliver exactly what you say you're going to deliver, then there's going to be somebody who's a competitor who will, and they're going to take your business and you're going to go away. So I'm going to be known for and help usher in the age of the global village, which means that we have credibility, we have trust, that we have integrity and authenticity and vulnerability. It's okay to make mistakes. I mean, I have a blooper reel of the videos I've done where I've just mispronounced names because why? It's okay to make mistakes. And that's the legacy, is showing our humanity in business and in life and being known for that. So I don't know the title of my book yet because I still have more interviews to do, but that's what I'm leaving for the world. And what's happening is I'm living it today and just improving the lives of so many people. And that's so much fun.
I love it. I think what you're doing is amazing, Mitchell. And more importantly, I love the legacy that you spoke of there, because in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you get to that self-actualization state. And I think you're there. You've acquired that identity, you're giving back, you're serving. And I think more importantly, you're going to leave the world a better place. And so that's phenomenal. So with that being said, let me just kind of recap a few things. I didn't mention our sponsor today, so let me do that. And then I'm going to come back with one little final thought. So real quickly, just as a sponsor mention, Universal Accounting Center is sponsoring today with a free copy of the book In the Black, 9 Principles to Make Your Business More Profitable. It's the how-to guide to literally take your business from where you are today, applying these 9 principles so that you can become more effective, more profitable, and literally grow your business. In applying these principles in your firm, you'll also get the techniques, the strategies that you're needing to take to your clients and be for them that trusted strategic advisor, offering those 9 principles that will enable them to become more profitable. So get your free copy today. It'll be in the episode's description as to where it is you can go to get a free copy of the book In the Black. I would also invite you to take some time to listen to Mitchel's TED Talk that he mentioned earlier, so that you can actually see what it is that you can do to become known, likable, and trustworthy, and use those as part of your sales strategy to literally acquire the clients that you're looking for. So go there to get the information about Mitchel and some of the other projects that he's involved in. And I'll even post there the interview that we did together, which he mentioned earlier. So Mitchel, with that being said, let me just kind of come back. I think you've done a wonderful job kind of giving us a perspective as accounting professionals, how we need to show up for our clients, how we need to actually be more present and attentive, and most importantly, be genuine so that they can, in fact, see us as those trusted strategic advisors that they can confide in and ultimately rely upon to get the information they're needing to make more intelligent business decisions in their companies. So would you have any final thoughts that you'd like to leave with our listeners?
I think you did a great job of summarizing. This is always a good question, and I'm immediately thinking about just sharing like how people get in touch. But before I do that, I really would say to you is think to yourself: are you living your legacy today? Are you doing the types of things that you want to be known for tomorrow? Are you delivering enough value for those each and every interaction that the person on the other side says, "Oh my God, that was just so amazing"? And if the answer to that question is no, you should ask yourself, is that important to me? And for some people, it's not, and that's okay. Many people have different forms of legacy, and that is really okay. If, on the other hand, your legacy is you want to deliver value in each and every interaction and have people remember you for the types of things you've added to the world, there's some really simple steps, and I'd say follow through. Just re-listen to this interview because that will help you a lot. Can I give? Do you mind if I give a way that people can reach out?
Yes, please go ahead.
So it's one of those things. I've got so many websites, like many of us do, and what I have is a single place I could send you to. So it's my name. It's MitchelLevy360.com. So it's MITCHELLLEVY 360.com. And what you do is the first thing that'll happen, you could see a quick 1.5 minute customer testimonial video. You can connect to me on social media. It'll point to the TED Talk. And if this was interesting to you, if you say, "Oh my God, I'd love to interact with Mitchel, and you know what, I'd like him to consider writing a book for me," I would be happy to explore whether or not it would make sense. And by the way, I am very happy to say no if it doesn't make sense, right? So you're going to get a very transparent answer to, does it make sense to do this? And a short answer to that, Roger, is we don't do memoirs. We don't typically do the book that's needed today. What we do is we help the author write a book that is going to help them be more successful tomorrow. So that's what we do. And so it's MitchelLevy360.com. And if you're interested, you could also go there and book time directly on my calendar. And Roger, I just want to say thank you for the way you approached this interview, because you allowed me to speak with my heart in a way that I haven't done on other interviews before. And I'm going to applaud you for giving me that opportunity. So thank you.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure and a joy. And I liked how you ended, because I think we all do need to live purposefully. And I think that is our legacy. So well said. I do invite everybody to listen to our other episodes and subscribe to our podcast. For more information on how you can apply these principles in your business, please visit us at universalaccountingschool.com and call us as well at 801-265-3777. And remember this, if it is about accounting, it is universal. Take care and have a great day. And thank you again, Mitchel.
Oh, my pleasure. You as well.
Bye-bye.